Senator Kim.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mr. Mador, I think I'd like to start with you just to be able to build on some of the conversation that's happened here. FTC has a particular structure in terms of its leadership. It's one that has the bipartisan tradition in that way. I guess I just wanted to ask you, do you see benefit in that type of structure and that type of bipartisan nature of FTC?
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, my experience, both as an attorney at FTC and as a practitioner appearing before it, is that the consensus building that took place at FTC always made its enforcement action stronger.
Yeah, I guess I just kind of raised that because, I know there was some talk about the independence of FTC and why I think it's so important that we ensure that, because, there's a sense of credibility, right? Like, I would imagine you believe that for FTC, for its rulings to be considered, for it to have the kind of resonance with the American people, about a sense of fairness, that credibility is critical for FTC to be able to function. Is that right?
Absolutely, Senator.
Yeah. So I just, as we kind of proceed on this, I know there's lots of politics swirling around, but you and I had a really good conversation talking through some critical issues, like, for instance, about the role of FTC when it comes to big tech. And I would believe that for FTC to make decisions that are potentially going to be controversial around big tech, it's important, right, that it be seen as being done from a sense of what's right for the American people and a sense of fairness, rather than something that's political or something that's associated with a political donor or a special interest group. Is that right?
So, Senator, the way I would view my job, if confirmed, is to show up each day working to serve the American people and enforcing the law the way that it has been written. And while I can't speak for the other commissioners, I'm confident that they share that view as well.
I hope so. And I think that that's something that, again, for the majority of people watching, I talked to people in New Jersey about this, they don't necessarily fully understand the debate about independence of different agencies. I think that's much more of a DC world view in that way, but they do understand fairness. And they do understand a sense of whether or not their interests are being put forward. So I ask, if you're confirmed, that you keep that in mind, about this. And if the FTC loses that sense of credibility, if it's seen as a political entity that is carrying out actions based off of whoever, which party is in control, I do think that it just very much will undermine the capacity for the FTC to be able to engage.
Thank you.
Mr. Kratsius, I wanted to ask you some questions here. I've heard you speak on this from a couple different angles, but I guess I just wanted to ask kind of directly, do you think we as a nation are spending enough on basic science research?
I think over the years, since I guess the 1950s and since sort of NSF was initially created, the amount of federally funded R&D has continued to generally increase. And I think it's been critically important to the way that we've been able to sort of make these discoveries. I think what's changed a lot over the years is the contribution that the private sector makes to the larger R&D ecosystem. I think right around the time of World War II, the percentage of R&D that the federal government was funding was more than 50%. And that's changed dramatically. And I think that's actually a good thing for the country. We're actually seeing some of the greatest innovations coming from the private sector.
But do you think that just overall spending, not just government spending, but private sector included, academia, like, where are we? I keep hearing a lot about China increasing their basic science research funding upwards of double digits. We are obviously not keeping pace with that trajectory. Does that concern you in terms of overall spending?
I think as someone who is deeply obsessed with American leadership in science and technology, I do believe that as an economy, continuing to invest in this critical R&D kind of across the board is beneficial to the country.
So right now, the foundation of it, as you said, government, private sector, sort of the largest amount of government's been decreasing in terms of total percentage. I think it's right around 40% government funding right now, 37% private sector. Does that seem fair to you? Is that sort of a right level? I'm trying to think through and understand your calibration here in terms of what you'd like to see and whether or not you think the private sector should take over more of what the government does when it comes to basic science research.
Yeah, I think what's amazing about the U.S. ecosystem is that a lot of these changes are driven by what I spoke about in my opening statement, this free market approach to scientific discovery in the U.S. I think the challenges and I think the problems with a sort of authoritarian or CCP type approach to science funding is that you end up having over-allocation to the wrong things and under-allocation to the right things. and thinking that, you can sort of be God for the day and make sure that you allocate things to the right places, I think is a mistake. And I think in the U.S., the reason why we do have the greatest chips in the world and the greatest algorithms in the world and the greatest applications in the world is because we go back to that free market approach to innovation.
I don't discount that, and I'll yield back to the chair in a second. But when you listed through in your opening statement, splitting the atom and getting a man to the moon, the transistor and the creation of the microchips, I mean, so much of that was based off of government research funding or government acquisition when microchips early on. So I just say, look, there's certainly models in that direction, but I do think that we need to be careful about moving too much towards one that's just solely based off of profitability. And with that, I'll yield back.
Thank you. Senator Peters.
Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to both of you on your nominations. Mr. Mader, regardless of your own accomplishments and qualifications, I want to follow up on a question that